At work, we were asked to write a story for Veterans Day, so this is my story. It's titled The Cold War by Staff Sergeant Zink. It was during the Cold War with Russia. At this time, I was stationed at K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base in Michigan. I was in munitions maintenance at that time. We were a SAC command base, which stands for Strategic Air Command. It was my first duty assignment, and I worked in the secure area, which means personnel must have a security clearance to get in that area or be escorted and monitored at all times. I had a top secret security clearance, since one of my duties was to transport nuclear weapons to and from the aircraft. Anytime anyone is near a nuclear weapon, there's a two-man policy, meaning two or more persons must be in full view of each other when around nuclear weapons. This is so no one person has unmonitored access to the weapons. Therefore, a lone person cannot tamper with any weapons without being noticed. The nukes were mounted on rotary launchers, and they were stored in a hardened facility. When they were needed on the flight line, they were transported on that trailer. K.I. Sawyer was a very cold place to be, and there was very little to do there. It was a very remote area. The coldest day I ever have experienced was at this base. I was on call over the weekend. Yep, I was called in to move a launcher with weapons from the B-52 back to the hardened facility. It was so cold my car wouldn't start. I called the sergeant back and asked for a ride to the facility. He told me I had to walk. I said, "It's 59 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit and a wind chill of 107 below. And the barracks were 1.5 miles from where I needed to go." He told me that doesn't change anything. Get here. Well, I did want to get in trouble, so I walked there. Next, I had to stand outside directing the guy that was driving the tug with the nuclear trailer attached while I was standing in the frigid cold. He never could back into the facility. I asked him to let me do it, but he just said, "I'll get it." Yeah, 25 minutes later in a frozen David, he did outrank me, so I was stuck with his decision. When I was back at work on a regular day, I informed my supervisor of what had happened. He told me he would take care of it, so it didn't happen again to anyone. He later told me that the sergeant was reprimanded and told me that if it ever happened again, he would be looking at a court-martial. Some of my other duties were performing inspections of numerous munitions items and equipment. B-52 have 20mm cannons on them, so we had to inspect all the ammunition for any defects. 20mm rounds are also percussion and electrically fired. The reason for this is to prevent the guns from jamming. They also have flares loaded on them to drop in case missiles were being shot at them. The heat from the flares is hotter than the engines on the aircraft. Of course, that is what the heat-seeking missile is made to lock on, the hottest heat source it can find. I also supplied EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, with C4, Comp C4, which is explosive. C4 is what EOD used to destroy any ordnances that were no longer serviceable. Inspecting and doing maintenance on the flares and the 20mm ammunition was always an uneasy feeling. We had to use copper and aluminum wool to clean across the contacts of these munitions, making sure there was no static in the room or within us, so none of the items would be accidentally ignited. Transporting blasting caps was another thing I didn't much like. Anything that's packed in sawdust, to keep it from any shock, made me nervous. One day I was picking up cases of C4 and a funny thing happened. Well, I thought it was funny to me. We were loading Comp C4 onto the back of a deuce-and-a-half truck to take to the EOD guys. The bed of those trucks was very high. So as usual, I threw the cases of Comp C4 up into the back of the truck, since each case weighed over 100 pounds. The other airman working with me freaked out and took off running over the berm. He screamed at me, "You're going to kill us!" And I busted out laughing. I convinced him that it was safe to handle these explosive in this manner, since Comp C4 is the most stable explosive there is. It looks and feels like modeling clay. It cannot be set off with a hammer, lit on fire, or any other manners such as these. You could eat it, but you wouldn't feel too well. Supposedly, it will only give you a stomach ache and diarrhea. Comp C4 needs to have another explosion to detonate it. This is what blasting caps are used for. The day we took the munitions for destruction C4 to EOD, they first asked if we wanted to help double stack the Comp C4 around the munitions. Then they asked us if we wanted to stay and watch them blow up everything. Of course we did. They told us it was going to be a great day to watch and feel the destruction. That day the cloud cover was very low, so in this circumstance the blast will be forced to travel more along the ground and give us a more maximum blast experience. We were told to take a bracing stance so as not to get knocked down from the shock wave. There was only a narrow road that we were standing on at a safe distance from the blast area. Well, they did have us cheat a little bit on the distance. We were all somewhat closer than the designated area. Everything was to be destroyed was also down below grade to keep the fragments from traveling towards us. This forced fragments mainly to go upward. Now everything was ready, and so were we. They told us to cover our ears, but I wanted to hear the blast as well as feel it, so I only partially covered my ears. Ready? Fire in the hole! And boy was it. It was quite the experience. You could see the shockwave traveling down the road towards us. All the plants and trees were bending in our direction as the shockwave blew past them. You could actually see the blast of air coming at us very fast, and then wham! What an impact and experience. They were right. If you didn't prepare and brace yourself, as we were told, you would end up on the ground. And that day was a blast. By David Zink, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Air Force. Thank you.